We are standing in the center of a celestial powder keg, where a massive alignment of planets in Sagittarius is set to trigger a triple whammy of fire energy, demanding that we confront the deep-seated childhood beliefs holding us back from a sudden Uranian breakthrough. Hey there, Truth Seeker. Welcome to the Star Kittens community where we discuss 13-sign astrology. Are you in alignment with your divine design? Do you want to master the metaphysical reality? Open the doors of perception. Each planetary body is an archetype, a template, if you will, that helps us interpret human behavior and the world around us. The more awake and aware we are, the more synchronicity will show up in your life. Our focus today is the Sagittarius new moon. We have the moon conjunct the Sun, Mars, Mercury and Pluto. The new moon makes an opposition to Vulcanus in Cancer and a favourable trine to Uranus in Taurus. To help us reach more souls with this important message, please like, share and subscribe. There is a lot going on, so let's jump in. Kia ora, David.
Kia ora.
I don't think I have seen this many planetary bodies conjunct. It is incredible to see so many things together. I'm sure that the energies for us coming up to this new moon will be probably quite confusing. I'll just highlight a couple of them. Of course, it is the new moon, so the sun and moon are conjunct at 32 degrees Sagittarius. If you, listener, have a little moment of, but I thought it was Capricorn season, it is not Capricorn yet. Very soon it will be, but right now use your app and you'll see that we are still in Sagittarius. We also have Mars, Mercury. We will be talking about Pluto as well. And then on the other side, we have Vulcanus and a favourable trine to Uranus. So a lot. But let's start with this sun and moon conjunction. Of course, the sun, it's a masculine energy. The moon is a feminine energy. Them coming together, it's confusing, it's pushing, pulling. How do you want to start off with this energy?
Well, I'll start off with a Happy New Year to those listeners who are now, at the 15th? It's hard to believe we're actually 15 days into the new year. It's pretty incredible. Time just seems to be going so fast. So, sun and moon. Yes, integration is the first word that comes to me when you have the sun and moon together, and the merging of the masculine and the feminine energy, and how that works and how that plays out is very individual. How we interpret that, how we feel that, how we perceive that. You see, some of us are very balanced already between our masculine and feminine energies in the way we deal with life, and whereas others are very polarized to one side or the other. And perhaps it's the people who are the most leaning towards the sun or the moon that the message of this new moon is particularly aimed at, because we're going to talk about a bunch of different things to do with beliefs, our behaviour towards one another, our individual and collective mindsets. But yes, you're right, the sun and moon coming together at a new moon can mean both integration and unity, but it can also be a time of tension. But overall, I feel that the Sagittarius energy, which we'll touch on next, and the way that these planets are configured, as you just touched on, with the number of them all lined up together, is that there is the word that I wrote down here was powder keg. There's a lot of energy here that could come to the surface, and by the surface I mean our awareness, and it can arrive via our emotional awareness, our intellectual awareness, our spiritual awareness. It could come through an awakening, and a eureka moment, an insight, could come mentally, could come emotionally, could come spiritually as well. So it's pretty exciting. There's a lot to talk about, and I'm looking forward to doing a bit of a deep dive.
Awesome. So Sagittarius, that's where we'll start. Sagittarius, it is a fire energy. The guardian is Jupiter. Of course, the last time the sun was already in Sagittarius, so we have given our audience a bit of an explanation of how we see that sign. It's very much how we view the world. And then, of course, on the other side is Gemini, which we spoke about last time. We get the beliefs that we hold now, they are made in our childhood. So the Sagittarian energy, together with this conjunction of the sun and moon, how can people see this, prepare themselves, sail through this time?
Yeah, if Sagittarius is the higher octave of Mercury 3, Sagittarius 9 in the numerological and also in the astrological mosaic, they sit opposite one another. So the opposition straight away of those energies says that we do have a push and pull energy between our beliefs and our philosophies. And I draw the distinction between beliefs and philosophies, because you can believe something, but it isn't necessarily a strongly held philosophical view. And that's perhaps the difference between Mercury, which we're going to touch on next because it's part of this conjunction, and Sagittarius is, our Mercury beliefs can be quite fleeting, but our Sagittarius philosophies can be with us for life. So Sagittarius is an energy that draws out of us very strong positions. We can take strong positions in Sagittarius. It's often said about Sagittarius that they can be very dogmatic and very knowledgeable, and that knowledge is based on experience. So when we have a sun and moon and a conjunction with Mercury and Mars, and it's in Sagittarius, and as you mentioned, we have the amplification of Jupiter, who's the ruler or guardian of Sagittarius. We have an amplification of this fire energy. And for those who follow the Chinese astrological system, they'll know that this is the year of a fire horse. We're coming out of, I think it's the year of the snake. Forgive me if I've got that wrong, but certainly we're going into a fire horse year, and I am a fire horse, so I understand this energy very well. And it's interesting to me that when that Chinese lunar year starts, I believe, which is in February, that will be the beginning of this fire cycle. But we're very much seeing here a amplification of that, if you like, in the Western astrological system, the 13 sign system, where we have the sun and moon in Sagittarius in a fire sign conjunct Mars, which is also fire, and opposite to Vulcanus, that we'll touch on later, which is a fire sign as well. So we do have a lot of fire, and as I mentioned last time, fire is the element of action. So what is being impressed upon us by the universal intelligence is that whatever it is that we realize or come to discover about ourselves or about our communities or about our collectives at this time is a consequence of the massive amount of volatile energies that are existing at this new moon. Whatever it is that we draw from it, we need to act upon it is the key. We need to take it and integrate it into our thinking and into our way of being, and we need to move forward with some confidence based on that belief, or based on that insight, or based on that awareness that we develop. So the key thing about Sagittarius is that recognition that this is potentially where we are stuck. We were talking before about the icon or the spirit animal or the imagery of Sagittarius, which many people know as the archer, but the archer is aiming for the sky, which represents our mental desire to expand and our mental desire to aim for the future. But of course that archer is sitting on top of a horse, or is fused into a horse figure. And so the icon for Sagittarius, the archetype for Sagittarius, is what they call that centaur. And as much as we want to push forward with our beliefs and push forward with our experiences, the archer sitting on top of the horse is constrained by his humanness. And he can only move as fast as the animal will allow him to move. And that speaks very much to some of the tensions that exist at this new moon, in so much as our mind may be moving quicker than our bodies. We may be seeing or experiencing things about ourselves, or about us as individuals, or about the collective, about our beliefs, about our worldview. We may be experiencing a desire to move forward, but we also need to recognize that we can only move at a certain speed, and that we are constrained to some degree by what it is that we learnt in childhood, which is the subject of Mercury, which is what we're going to talk about next.
Yes, and for those people who are a little bit confused, Mercury is the guardian of Gemini, and we tend to swap and change the guardian with the name of the sign. So Mercury sits at 30 degrees Sagittarius at this new moon, so conjunct to the new moon. Mercury, it is all about our individual mindset, and of course that is formed in childhood by the people that are around us, and then those forming years very much determine how we view what our beliefs are as we move into adulthood in our entire life. So difficult it can be, isn't it, when you have such firm beliefs that are coming from your mum, dad, grandparents, and then you are interacting with people at school, at work. You are stuck in this echo chamber and on social media, so you believe that your views are the only views, but that's far from true. So how do you see that at this new moon?
Yeah, I mean, that illustrates perfectly what I'm talking about with the Sagittarian archer sitting on top of the horse, or fused. In fact, he's not even, if you look carefully at that icon, he's not sitting on top of the horse, he's actually part of the horse, and the man are joined. And so that is a great illustration of some of the constraints and the limits of our thinking. And that thinking, as you rightly pointed out, begins in childhood, in that house of Mercury or Gemini, which is childhood learning. And that childhood learning is where we absorb, and we, depending on our age and depending on how we've developed and how we develop our minds, which is very much a reflection of the people around us. If we are challenged to think critically as a child, then chances are by the time we're expressing our Sagittarian energy, which is the opposite side of that, we are free thinkers, and we are happy to indulge in vigorous debates with others. If you're talking about, rubbing shoulders with people who don't necessarily believe the same as you, a lot of that will go back, that mindset, as you talk about, will go back to that Mercury or Gemini experiences of learning, as to not only what it is that we learned or how we learned, but who we learned from. Who were our role models as kids? Who were we looking up to? Who did we respond best to, and who did we reject? And often those childhood dramas play out in the Sagittarian philosophical debates that people have, which can become quite aggressive too. In Sagittarius, if we strongly hold a belief based on, let's say, our childhood experience of culture, we were raised in a particular culture, and it was a culture of deference, for example, and that was a culture where we learned from a strong patriarchal figure that mum didn't ever push back on dad, and that mum was kind of seen but not heard, and that we learnt that the role of the female in that childhood experience, as a reflection of cultures that exist like this, is that females are to be different to males, and that can form into a Sagittarian belief. And then when you play that out in terms of that belief is so strongly held in that individual, and they come across somebody at work at school, in their sports team, online, that has a diametrically opposed view, that can lead to a lot of friction and a lot of defensive and aggressive behaviour. So we aggressively attack that we don't like, and we aggressively defend that which we do like. So there's a lot of polarization, as I touched on before, at this new moon coming through. And that Mercury, of course, when you look at the icon for Mercury being the twins, and the fact that you've got these two pillars, the Mercury very much, Mercury Gemini, as you touched on, Mercury being the ruler of Gemini. We can't talk about Mercury without referring also to its house. That mercurial energy is often said that people have a mercurial mindset, which means that they can change their mind quite quickly. Mercury is the fastest moving planet through the cosmos, and it has the energy of rapidity, of speed. So this is, again, I touched on this before, is where I draw this distinction between the Mercury energy and the Sagittarius energy, which is a little slower. Mercury can be where we flip and flop and change our minds quite quickly in childhood, but that's due to the fact that we are learning a whole bunch of different things. But as we get older and as we age, we tend to fixate on, 2 or 3 strong beliefs which become our philosophies for the way that we live our lives. And by the time that that's formed in our mindset, it's very hard to reverse that. The only way really to reverse anything that is stuck as a mindset by the time we're 20, 25, 30 or older is to go back to that mercurial experience of childhood and ask yourself, what did I learn? Who did I learn it from? Who were my role models? And ask also that question, is this still appropriate? Is this belief that I'm defending, is this philosophical view that I have of the world, is it still appropriate? And that's part of the key to this new moon. We're going to touch on the Uranian energy, which is very disruptive. We're going to touch on the Plutonic energy, which is also disruptive. There's a lot of transformative energy here, as well as fire energy, which is about taking action. So I think the key message of the Mercury and Sagittarius conjunction, or Mercury conjunct Sun and Moon in Sagittarius, and that combination of planetary energies, is that what's at issue here is how we think, and ultimately Sagittarius, how we think about the world. But that's a step ladder, if you like, is how we think isn't necessarily how we think in a particular situation may change depending on the circumstances, for example. That probably isn't a philosophy, that's more like a belief. If I have a strong philosophical view, and these philosophical views are often bred into us through culture. I mean, that the strongest Sagittarian energy that I can think of is that cultural imprint. This is where this tribalism comes from. This is where this idea that I'm part of this people, this group, this, and it's culture and it's religion as well as the other one that are really imprinted. So if we were imprinted in childhood, that Mercury experience, if we were imprinted strongly by either a religious beliefs or cultural beliefs or both, by the time we get to Sagittarius, we are pretty much dyed in the wool when it comes to those views, and we may be unwilling to yield or bend to other people's perspectives. That confrontation there is absolutely key. That limits of our mindset, that limits of our philosophical system that we use to deal with the world, that is what is being challenged here at this new moon.
And it's tough. It's tough to look in the mirror and confront your own beliefs. If you're even willing to look, a lot of us are not willing to take that look at ourselves and question, is this beneficial for me? Am I doing good by standing so stuck in my beliefs? Or should I go more with the flow and look at things differently. So as you mentioned, there is a lot of fire right now, a lot of fire energy, and almost the Lord of Fire. When I think of Mars, I think of fire. He sits just 3 degrees away from this new moon at 29 degrees Sagittarius. So Mars, fire, god of war. What else do you want to focus on?
Yeah, so we have all the fire signs, don't we? We have the sun representing fire, we have Mars representing fire, and we have Sagittarius representing fire. So we have all the fire energies all co-located, all together at this new moon, and that's a triple whammy of fire. And it is, Mars energy is very blunt and brutal and pretty unsophisticated, to be fair, which means that there's not a lot you can say about Mars. I mean, it's represented by the ram, and if we think about rams, they can be incredibly stubborn but also aggressive. They are creatures within that particular kingdom that are an apex. They're at the apex. You know, the ram is the boss, and of course the war planet or war and conflict is often associated with Mars. But going a little deeper than that, Mars also represents the masculine energy and the desire to move forward and to take action. But if we pair Mars energy, the heat of Mars, with the thinking of Mercury and the beliefs of Sagittarius, what that says to me is that there is room here, or a lot of room, for polarization to be expressed, for belligerence, for aggression to be expressed, and that we will defend our Mercury or Sagittarius mindset and beliefs, sometimes at all costs. The warning, I guess, with Mars, when paired with Sagittarius fire and also the sun being fire, is that we can overheat. We can take it too far. So if we're having a vigorous debate, for example, and I'm drawing on the Sagittarian and the Mercury energy here, we're having a vigorous debate with somebody online or in real life, with a family member, with the neighbour, with a friend. We are finding ourselves digging in, or we find them digging in. We find ourselves triggered. That might be a signal under this energy, which is very forceful, to just back away, to just step down, to just recognize, hey, the energies that are in the ethers at the moment are very strong. You may be pushing against somebody or something that won't yield, that won't bend, that won't give ground. So I have a feeling that we need to have a lot of emotional intelligence at this time to navigate through this new moon phase, but also keeping a mind on the broader picture, which is this is a fire year. And again, I touched on the fact that under the Chinese, this is a fire horse. It's a very, very aggressive and forceful energy, fire. It is foundational to everything, and Mars being the first, represented by the number 1, is the primordial spark. So I guess the messages, without overdoing it with Mars, is there's a warning. There's two sides to this. There's a warning that if we are in communication, Mercury, or we are in a vigorous debate, Sagittarius, with somebody, then we need to make sure that we don't take it too far, that using the battering ram of my belief is stronger than your belief, or that I don't accept your belief and you need to accept my belief. In other words, that real dogmatic, belligerent, aggressive behavior that you often see with Mars energy. The warning is one of you will need to back down. If it's groups that are warring with each other or that are arguing with each other, then somebody needs to back down. Unfortunately, at this time, there isn't a lot of that conciliation energy. There isn't a lot of that diplomatic energy. There's kind of, the word I had here was polarization. There's a lot of you're in this tribe or this camp or this set of beliefs, and there's potential for very significant flashpoints and accelerations of deep rifts and fissures that exist. So with that in mind, we need to be emotionally intelligent, and we need to be aware that this could be a time where we just need to agree to disagree, where we just need to back down, where we need to be, say, take the moral high ground, for example. But the other side of Mars, of course, is that this may be the push or the impetus or the tailwind that we need to take action. You know, if you're thinking about, as you mentioned before, you've been through a journey of self-reflection, of introspecting, of looking inward, or you may have been planning something, Mercury, and thinking about it. Now's the time to move forward from that, to take advantage of that thinking, Mercury, and step forward confidently into perhaps the unknown.
Yeah, take that first step, and it's a good time to do at a new moon, start of a new cycle. So on the other side of the sun and moon, at 3 degrees Capricorn, we have Pluto. So this is another one of those planets where everyone is thinking that it's in a different position, but in the night sky, Pluto is very much at the beginning of Capricorn. Pluto is that transformative energy, far away from where we are in the universe. My children are just learning about this planet versus dwarf planet, but nonetheless, it is a she, because we see Pluto as a feminine energy. She has a lot of energy to give, to help us transform, and what a time to transform during this new moon.
Yeah, Pluto, it cracks me up. I was reading something somewhere about, it was somebody in the US Congress, some congressman was saying, oh, Pluto's been downgraded and is, you know, from planet status, and there's been this debate about Pluto being a planet, or is she a planet, is she a dwarf planet? I mean, what's a dwarf planet? I mean, all of that. But that there illustrates exactly what we're talking about here with the Mercury Sagittarius. There is a set of beliefs around Pluto being a planet. There's a set of beliefs around Pluto being a dwarf planet. And those two camps come into conflict. And that is a perfect illustration of how Mercury is the link between the two, being the vector of communication. So it's just fascinating. To me, a dwarf planet it's the same thing. It's a planet. It's a planetary body. You could take the words and actually just take planet out of there and say it's a planetary body, and then both sides will agree. Well, see, that there, what I've just done with that conflict or polarization, using Pluto as an example of what could happen at the sun and moon together at this new moon with all of this fire energy and polarization, is I'm a Libra. And that's what a Libra would do. If they were listening to two people arguing about this person saying it's a dwarf planet, this person saying it's a planet, then a Libra might come in the middle and say, how about we just call it a planetary body? And then both people are actually disarmed in that situation because there's nothing to argue about anymore. But yet, unfortunately, we don't have much Libra energy or any of that going on. So let's just touch on Pluto. We've done a lot of discussion about how important it was when Pluto came to 0 degrees Capricorn, and how that corresponded with the 250 years going back to 1776. We won't do the deep dive now. There's plenty of discussion that we've had about that. Suffice to say that Pluto is very important in the astrological mosaic from a collective perspective. There's a bunch of things that if you tie back to 1776 and you go back to now on a collective level, i.e. about beliefs, you know, the American hegemon being one of them, 1776, and the conjunction of Pluto to this new moon, but also going back a few months when Pluto first moved into Capricorn, which only just happened. That was the triggering of, or the closing of a almost 250 year cycle, which In the 13 sign astrology, you won't get this in the 12 sign because people think that Pluto's in Aquarius. Well, Pluto in reality is not in Aquarius. Pluto is in Capricorn, but there's another situation of beliefs. 12 sign, 13 sign. 12 signers will say, why are you talking about the Pluto in Capricorn, and it's not in Capricorn, it's in Aquarius, and therefore we've got this, the age of Aquarius has begun, and this and that and the next thing. Just again, another example of just how polarizing not only Pluto is, but how polarizing, or how much polarizing energy there is at this new moon. But for me, Pluto represents where our darkest fears reside. So Pluto represents, as a water sign, as the second water sign after Cancer, Pluto represents our unconscious memories that we don't want to confront, that may float into our reality through dreams or through impressions or just through phobias and feelings that we have, particularly strong feelings where we just have a sense of dread. You know, something like people have phobias of heights and loud noises and all sorts of things. Often they are coming from what I call the Pluto repository of memory, which resides in the collective unconsciousness. So if Pluto is in the mix here at this new moon, and I mentioned right at the beginning that there was this powder keg energy that's just beneath the surface. You know, we've got the moon, which is not a conscious energy, it's an instinctive unconscious energy. We've got Pluto, which is an unconscious energy. These are the energies that we don't get at or experience through our minds. We experience through our emotions, and we experience through our bodies. We experience the debilitating fears and the shadow aspects of self, the pieces of self that we've cast aside, that we don't want to confront that reality about either our lineage or our roots or who we are or what we've done or what our family's done or what our culture's done. These are the types of things that reside in that Pluto energy and in the Pluto archetype. So if we juxtapose that over Mercury beliefs and communication, Mars warring energy, Sagittarius philosophies, and we ask ourselves, what is it that we are not confronting at this new moon? What is it that we need to confront, that we need to surface in order to move forward both individually and collectively at this new moon? Because sure as can be, whatever it is that perhaps is holding us back, both at an individual level or a collective level, it resides in Pluto. Or it resides in the moon, which we call the repository of soul. So Pluto could be the ghosts of the past. Pluto is the areas of our life that we must overcome through the process of illumination. Illumination means we cast our conscious awareness onto something, onto a subject, onto an issue. This is where we consciously decide that we want to deal with a trauma, we want to deal with what is hidden, we want to deal with what is unknown, and that in and of itself is a scary proposition. But we have the Mars energy that allows us to go forward confidently, and we've got the Mercury energy that allows us to think about these things in a way that says, okay, look, there may be some darkness residing in my family, there may be some darkness residing in my past, there may be some darkness residing in past lives. Now is a good time through the process of working with those energies to bring the light of consciousness to them. We can only overcome when we are consciously aware of what it is that's holding us back. So the dark matter, Mars says, don't be fearful. You need to go forward confidently and look at those fears, look at those limitations, look at those shadow aspects of self and of the collective, and be confident that if you move forward intentionally, then you can get a breakdown initially, but you can also get a breakthrough. We've described Pluto as a metaphor, as the deep space or the deep water. So this is where we go to the outer limits of what we know. And I think space and water are a good analogy of that, insofar as when we look at human technology right now, we haven't probed the depths of space and we haven't probed the depths of the seas either. So there is a lot that is unknown, and yet that is part of our reality. We just haven't embraced it. The reason that we want to know more feeds into the idea of Sagittarius and the archer sitting on the back of the horse. Sagittarius is an energy that we are naturally inclined to want to know more. Mercury is an energy of curiosity, and that pairs beautifully with the Pluto energy of wanting to know more, wanting to understand more, wanting to go deeper in our understanding, wanting to go into the substrate of reality, wanting to unearth and understand the human operating system. That's exciting to me, but again, it comes down to mindset, and Pluto is a beautiful energy to work with, but we have to have the right mindset, and we have to be confident that when we tackle our fears and when we tackle the unknown, that we have the light of source by our side, and that we're not going into really the unknown. We're just actually peeling back the layers on something that the time has come, and often those layers are to do with these beliefs. You know, why is it that we believe, it's because my mum believed that, and her mum believed that, and her mum believed that? Well, maybe it's time to put that on the table. Well, that's a classic manifestation of Pluto, is you're going deep into the layers of unconsciousness and bringing it to the surface and saying, okay, that's no longer relevant, that's no longer serving me, so it's time to bring that to the surface from the deep space or the deep water, bring the light of illumination to it, and move forward confidently from that place.
Yeah. And I have learned to embrace Pluto. I went through life while still believing in the 12 sign system for 30 odd years, that I was Sagittarius rising. But using the true positions of everything, I am a Scorpio rising. So Pluto plays a big part in the way I am. I'm familiar with going into the deep seas of my emotions and then learning to transmute those. So it's exciting to have her energy here actually with this new moon. Next, let's talk about the opposition. So we're going to the other side of the chart. So opposite this new moon sits Vulcanus at 6 degrees Cancer. And of course, Cancer is the home sign to the moon. So again, this residence of this energy. You have told us about the Vulcanus story before, but perhaps just briefly bring that back to the surface and see what else you would like to talk about.
Yep, those who watch or are familiar with Star Trek and the Vulcan sign, I think it's Spock was from Vulcan, or he does the V thing with his hands. That Vulcanus energy, that is related to the myth or the planet, or it's not a planet, it's a planetary body of Vulcanus. The interesting thing about Vulcanus is that many astrologers will not be talking about him at this new moon because they don't consider it to be important and they don't consider it to have any relevance. But yet it's incredibly relevant because Vulcan right now, as you mentioned, is sitting in Cancer, which is the home sign of the moon. So there's a correspondence straight away. And the fact that Vulcan is sitting in opposition to this massive bunch of planets lined up on the other side is also important for us to look at, because when Vulcanus is in Cancer, it's probably potentially the most tricky place for Vulcan, who is the lord of fire or underwater fire. So think geothermal energy is the domain of Vulcanus. Think of how there can be dormant volcanoes beneath the water and all of a sudden they erupt. Well, when they erupt with great force and great power. And that is part of the Vulcanus in Cancer archetype, which is sitting opposite this new moon. So we need to touch on it. The story itself, the myth itself, is one of estrangement between a mother, a patriarchal strong mother, and a son. And what I will say about that is that the short version of this is that mother had this son, and he, in her view, didn't cut the muster. So he was cut loose. He was considered to be a weakling, an inferior son. His brother or sibling was Mars, and I was touching on that before. So Mars, with all of the power and authority and strength and warrior energy that's assigned to Mars, you think about that's his sibling, and mother's sitting there going, I've got Mars as a son, and now I've got Vulcanus as well. And Vulcanus just wasn't in the same league, and so he was kicked out of the family home. And this is a story of a son being estranged from a mother and not knowing why, and not understanding what the heck happened. All he knew was that he was apart from his family, and he became an emasculated male, a black sheep who was very estranged. And there's a message here specifically about mothers and sons where there is an estrangement or alienation between those two. It is so important. The message from the universal intelligence and source here is that if we take a step back to what I was saying before about how the Mars, Mercury, Sagittarius energy is, we will defend these childhood beliefs. If as a son you fell out with your mum in childhood and you are 30, 40, 50, 60 and mum is still alive, then it is time to Pluto have a look at that and find a way to reconcile that relationship. And equally from the same message to the mothers. Vulcanus is a story of mothers and sons falling out. And the difficult reconciliation process, once that door is opened again, see, mum opened the door to Vulcan returning to the family, but Vulcan had so many unresolved issues, as we were talking about before, that before he was willing to rejoin the fold or the family, he needed to play out some very angry dramas. And those dramas included manipulation and overt use of power and force. And he wanted his mother to feel the pain that he had been carrying for all of the years before she invited him back into the family home. There are some who are listening to this who will know people, men or mothers, who are in this exact situation. So the message very clearly from the cosmos is at this time is, it is time, Pluto, to look at Mercury beliefs in childhood, to look at your beliefs about that situation. No matter what it was that caused the problem or the conflict, it is time to bring it to the surface. This is a perfect illustration of the Pluto energy, that the experience has been buried by one or both parties in that mother-son archetype. This is an archetypal relationship of mother-sons. Now, what came to me when I was thinking about the Vulcanus energy, rather than telling the story again, was to talk about, in the context of this new moon, is just how angry some of these boys are. These boys and men are angry. Mars. They are seething. They are potentially violent. They are seeking revenge. That energy is in the collective unconscious, Pluto. That could be tripwired at this new moon, especially with the Mars energy, especially with the frustration around the Mercury, the frustration of being able to express oneself, of feeling constrained and not being able to find your voice. This is what could tripwire some of these angry, dispirited, emasculated males to start lashing out and thrashing around. Now, if you think about Pluto also representing massive power, some of these individuals may be in positions of great power and authority now who could wrought and wreak a lot of damage around them if left unchecked. That is the message of this Vulcanus energy. Remember, Vulcan, underwater earthquakes, is sitting in water, the sign of the moon. If the moon is the repository of soul, this means that some of these dramas may in fact have been playing out lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. They may have been karmic loops that are coming to the surface now that Pluto and Vulcanus together are saying, this is difficult matter for both the mothers and the sons, but it is so important. If there is an angry, emasculated, violent, potentially violent, vengeful male, especially if they're in a position of power and authority, they may need to be given some love and attention and care and wrapped in a blanket of understanding. And there may be some mothers whose pain, Pluto, is now coming to the surface, where they have buried it, Pluto, but now with all of the fire energy and this, as I said, this powder keg of issues, emotional issues, is coming to the surface. And the Mars energy says we need to confront these things rather than just push them away, shy away from them, and pretend that they don't exist. What also comes to me is an expression that you talk about with Vulcanus in Cancer, is trapped emotions. And when we think about the modalities to get to trapped emotions, tapping would be one of them. Acupressure, massage could be one of them. Aromatherapies, anything that triggers some of those emotional pathways to be ignited and released is very much a Pluto, Vulcanus, Mercury, Mars energy all working together in a positive way. So unfortunately, the story of Vulcanus and the message here isn't particularly easy to deal with. It won't be for everybody, but we can be sure that right now there are mothers and sons who need to know that this is the time to start the process of healing and reconciliation and winding back some of those childhood beliefs and winding back some of those karmic loops and looking towards the Uranian energy, which is the last piece of this interpretation, which comes next, and the freedom that can come from going down the path of what can be difficult emotionally, but will be incredibly rewarding for those that are willing to take that path.
And that's so important. It is rewarding. It is rewarding to let go. Difficult to start that journey. But I said to a friend when it was like, I don't like cold water. But I have never regretted a swim in the ocean. I've never regretted looking at a belief that I have held for many years and then asking if that's still valid to have that belief. And so that would be my message, that take that first step to look at how you view certain things and are you ready to let them go. So as you said, a trine to Uranus. Let's finish off with something positive. So at the time of this new moon, which here in New Zealand is on the 19th of January at 8:52 a.m., Uranus sits at 3 degrees in Taurus. Taurus is an earth sign. Uranus making this beautiful trine with the new moon. More transformation energy. So how would you like to close this out?
Well, Uranian energy in the trine here is an ooh la la. That's so good that this has arrived as the last piece of this interpretation, because what a great place to wrap it up. If we just go back and summarize briefly, we are talking about a powder keg of emotions and mental energies that are building up at this new moon. We get to the emotions because the moon is strongly aspected both through the conjunction with the moon, but also with Vulcanus in the sign of Cancer, which is the moon's home sign. So we have emotional and mental tension coming to the surface in a way that is going to be very confronting, both on an individual and a collective level. So with that as the backstory, as the preamble, Uranus here in the trine offers to us breakthrough, quantum leaps, accelerated learning, insights, aha moments, eureka moments, absolute freedom from oppressive, emotional and mental loops. Whilst there is also a spiritual element always to any interpretation, because we are spirit having a human experience, the emphasis at this new moon is particularly mental Mercury and physical Mars and emotional moon. So the tension that exists where we will get the Uranian breakthroughs is in the areas of, like you say, with Uranus being in an earth sign, is in the area of our body. And I touched on before some of those healing modalities that you can get at that help you to deal with trapped emotions, and that help us to release some of those issues that are locked in our unconsciousness that need to be surfaced. That can be done through, sound therapies, light therapies, aromatherapies, taste. There's all kinds. You take a tincture, and what's the idea of that is that it triggers some pathway to open up, or it revives an aspect of our genetics to come alive because it needs that stimulation. So there's a number of ways of applying the Uranian freedom energy, the esprit de corps, the desire to break free, to any of these mental, emotional or physical limitations that we may be confronting, and or that may be manifesting through our relationships and families, particularly with reference to the Vulcanus energy between the mothers and the sons. So if you are on the path of self-discovery, if you are on the path of a willingness to introspect, if you are willing to do some shadow work, if you are at a point of your life that you are willing to take a look at some of those things about yourself, about your family, about your beliefs, about your childhood, in order to be more of who you are, in order to express your potential more fully, in order to come into alignment with your divine design, in order to just be more effective at what you do, to be a more confident human being, to attack life with more gusto, to push through limitations. The Uranian energy promises to us breakthrough. It promises to us illumination. It promises to us accelerated leaps and bounds where we can move forward because we took the steps to position ourselves. What's the expression? That serendipity or luck happens, luck happens when preparation and serendipity meet. So luck will happen in your life when you prepare yourself for luck and then you get a serendipitous event, something just comes out of nowhere, i.e. Uranian energy. When Uranian energy strikes, the people that are prepared for and open for those opportunities or those lucky breaks, if you like, they're the ones that have actually decided to consciously deal with, in this context of the sun and moon, they've decided to consciously deal with that which is holding them back, specifically in the areas of their beliefs, their mindset, or their emotions. So if you are feeling like you are ready for a leap, then be in that energy, be in that space of expectation, because I think that the Uranian trine here is a tailwind. It's very positive. It's a boost. It's a leap. There's a doorway that's open for us. And those that are ready and willing to take a leap, that doorway will open. And who knows what stands on the other side. When we think about the Uranian energy and those that do the tarot cards, I believe, and my understanding of the tarot is that the Uranian energy is the 0 card, or the first card is the Fool, who takes that leap into the unknown. And this is potentially the start or the portent of a new reality for you, if you are prepared to do some of the work on your mindset and on your emotions as well. So very positive, great way to wrap up this reading and this interpretation.
Indeed. Thank you so much, David. For you listening, you can listen on the go, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Podbeam, and all the others. All our videos are on YouTube. If you are intrigued and want to find out where your sun was at time of birth, or your Pluto, of course, what Ophiuchus house do you have, hit us up for a chat or a reading. We love doing those, getting you in touch with your divine design of this lifetime. Find us on social media. We are on Instagram, StarKittens13sign. And then we will meet you again for the next full moon. Until then.
Namaste.
Ngā mihi.